Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. To paraphrase the late Genesis P. Orridge of the legendary industrial electronica group Throbbing Gristle, the Brian Jonestown Massacre did the 1960s better than the 1960s did the 1960s. For the past 30 years, Anton Newcombe's ongoing musical project has been a fixture and an institution in American underground rock, particularly with devotees, among fans, fellow musicians, and critics, of psychedelia. But psychedelic rock is a very narrow parameter for this most prolific and innovative of bands. Folk rock, country, blues, punk rock, shoegazer, post-punk, electronic dance music subgenres such as trip-hop and techno, ambient soundscapes, all have been and continue to be elements of the grand tapestry of Newcombe's vision of truly cosmic American music. But the BJM aren't and have never been mere retro revivalists or shallow genre hoppers. There's a postmodern, mordant wit to their album and song titles that belie a cheeky slagging off of their heroes as much as there is reverence, not to mention a lyrical range that has always traversed between heartbreaking emotional honesty and flippant, punk-infused attitude. As I said, Newcombe has been leading this revolving cast of musicians for about 30 years, but it's the first 2 decades of their existence, the 1990s and 2000s, or the noughties, that yielded their most enduring, well-known, challenging, and outright brilliant music. It's this time period we're going to focus on as we explore the first 15 years of the BJM's catalog and shine a loving light on all of it. Needless to say, in a parallel universe where rock music is still a major pop cultural force and actual good rock music got its props, Anton Newcombe would be as revered as Radiohead, Jack White, or Green Day. So, welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report as the Parallel Universe All-Stars present the Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Well, hello there, Arturo. Looking forward.
There.
Yeah, looking forward to this episode. I know that this is kind of a labor of love of yours.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, this is a 20-year project for you. So
yeah, no, I've been a hardcore Jonestown fan for many years. I got into them right after the movie Dig when it came out in 2004, and I got the 2-disc compilation, Tepid Peppermint Wonderland
from 2004. Yep,
from 2004. I fell in love with that, and then that got me into the albums proper. And since then, I count Jonestown as one of my 10 all-time favorite bands.
Yeah, my experience with Jonestown is purely born through my friendship with you. This is sad but true. You know, for a rock podcaster, I long ago abandoned live music as far as going out to shows.
Right.
And, you know, part of it is health reasons, but my hearing. But the last real show that I attended, as in like in a venue of decent size, was the time you and I saw BJM at Terminal 5 in New York City.
2008, yeah.
That was 2008 or 2009?
2008.
It was 2008, yeah, because they had just released My Bloody Underground, and so they were supporting that. Yeah, they played several songs from that album. But I just thought they were great. And, you know, I'm a huge Joel Goen is the man.
I think it's Guyan, isn't it?
Guyan? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in Dig, they pronounce his name Joel Guyan. So
okay, well, there you go, Guyan. Okay, Well, but he's a show unto himself.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
he's a super. He's the most charismatic member of that whole entourage.
oh, I know. I mean, just
Yeah.
standing at the center of the stage with the tambourine, and he just commands your attention. It's pretty special. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's what we'll be talking about soon. But first, we need to take a celestial detour and rip the space-time continuum and visit your favorite place, right, Art?
I wish I could live there full time.
Yeah, the parallel universe. Over in the parallel universe, rock never went the way of jazz. It never became a niche, and it is still the thing, man. Heavy metal thunder is still roaring. Like big rock bands other than Coldplay and Oasis are still selling stadiums. You still have charismatic frontmen that are becoming like huge celebrities. We have our modern day equivalent of Elton John, and everything is right with the world. That's a fancy way of saying that this is the segment of the show where Arturo and I cover new and newish albums and artists and songs that we think that you would dig, and that in a just world, a parallel universe, these bands would be a big deal, and we want to amplify them. So, with that said, Art, who are you covering in this edition of the Parallel Universe?
Yes, the Irish band Sprints recently released their second full-length album, All That Is Over, and it's a nifty little cracker of a modern alternative rock. Lead singer and guitarist Carla Chubb said in an interview that their primary inspirations are Patti Smith, Susie and the Banshees, and PJ Harvey. I would say this is mostly true. The Banshees' influence is mainly from their heavy, abrasive early period of the late 1970s. There are also interesting elements of grunge and noise punk that give Sprints' sound extra propulsive thrust. Lead single Descartes, yes, the lyrics actually reference the French philosopher and transpose his ideas to a modern social context, and the adrenaline rush of Need reflect the band's urgent punk impulses. On the other hand, Rage has a very Brian Jonestown Massacre-esque droning psychedelic groove. Epic album closer Desire, with its wide-ranging textures and slow-building intensity, is an alluring hybrid of prog rock and post-punk. Overall, it's a solid 3.5 out of 5-star album, and one that definitely builds interest for this group as this group evolves from here on out. Chris?
Yeah, here's my take on Sprints. When they focus on punk rock, they're great. Descartes is great. Something's Gonna Happen is probably the best song on the album. Need is great. When they don't focus on punk, it kind of falls apart. The first two songs in this album, when I was first listening to it, are very sort of ethereal, droning.
The first two songs are they're unnecessary. They could have just started straight with Descartes.
Yeah, it's kind of like post punk. Yeah. Otherwise known as terrible. So that kind of set a bad tone for me. And then Descartes comes in. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's like, why didn't you do that in the first place? So yeah, I just want, this is a band that I would want to hear and see in the future. Just stick to the chug-a-lug punk, because when they do that, they rock and they're really engaging, and they're worth talking about. So yeah, inconsistent for me, and that kind of drony stuff is usually. I mean, you're more of a British post-punk guy than I am. And to an extent, some of that stuff does work. And, through this podcast, I've come to appreciate some of that stuff. But here, it's hard to do. It's harder to do well than it lets on, obviously. And Sprints proves that. So that's what I have to say about that. Any other thoughts before we move on to my pick?
No. Well, we're going to be talking a little bit about the British post-punk influence in the Brian Jonestown Massacre, which is very underrated, actually.
Yeah. Very, very underrated. It's through all the '60s retroism, it's definitely underneath the filament. So anyway, now let's segue into my pick for this week. And we do a thing in this segment that we call the parallel vault. And, in the early days of this podcast, first year and a half or so, we used to end the show with a segment that we called the vault, where Art and I would offer either an obscurity. Well, I think the format we ended up falling into is that Art would offer an obscurity from the past, and I would offer up forgotten classics. Albums that were big like 50 years ago, but had kind of lost its way in the modern canon. But so we ended up chopping that off for time reasons, really, and also for repetitiveness reasons, because if you think about it, our episodes are essentially big vaults. But to capture some ways the spirit of the vault, we decided that there could be a parallel vault. And the parallel vault, it extends now. We say it goes back a decade, which means we're almost in 2016 as the outer edge of the parallel vault, and so that gives us an opportunity to discuss records that we really like, or recent discoveries, from a couple of years back that we're digging and we want to share. And so that's where I'm at this week with Parallel Vault. And I'm going to be talking about a band that I just talked about 2 months ago on this podcast, right. Geese, my new favorite band. And their album from 2023, the awesomely awesome 3D Country, which was kind of strange. I did not know about Geese until 2025. But until earlier this year with their album Getting Killed, which I covered earlier this year. But there's some fanboys on Twitter. There's some critic boys. Matthew Perpetua is one of them. Stephen Hayden, another great writer, is another. And their shtick was, now people are paying attention. They kind of slept on 3D Country. How dare you? And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they have. Let's see what they're talking about. So after being exposed to Getting Killed and really, really liking it, really enjoying it, so right now, unless there's going to be a major upset here at the Wire, that's my number one album for 2025. So I went back and checked out 3D Country, and true to the advertising from the writer boys out there. It's a really great record. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So I'll remember 2025 really as the year I discovered Geese, kind of like I remember 2023 as the year I discovered Zach Bryan. This Brooklyn-based this band just makes really great rock and roll. And band leader Cameron Winter is one of modern rock's most peculiar frontmen. The band's album from earlier this year, like I said, Getting Killed, is, again, my favorite of this year, filled as it is with quirky but soulful indie rock tunes, including the odd but cool Trinidad, the lovely sing-along Husbands, and the groove-tastic rocker Bow Down. Getting Killed was Geese's fourth album, so strangely, as I said, I hadn't heard of them until I came across Getting Killed. So, of course, that made me want to go back and check out their previous record, 3D Country, which was, had its own renewed buzz on social media. And boy, is that album an event, and one I highly, highly recommend you check out as well. Turns out Cameron Winter is a more adventurous frontman than I thought. On Getting Killed, he plays with his voice to create an off-kilter crooner persona, using a voice that can be described as a melding of Radiohead's Tom York, 1920s singer Al Jolson, the Kermit the Frog guy from Canned Heat, and a drunken Van Morrison. It's pretty wild. But on 3D Country, Winter is having even more fun with playing with his voice, and he sings mostly in a deep-throated low register, like he's trying to be a hipster Leon Redbone. So he goes completely in the opposite direction, and hey, it works really, really well. Meanwhile, the songs are rockinger and more rollicking here than they are in general than they are on Getting Killed. The band just sounds like they're having a blast playing these hyper energetic songs. On some of them, they're accompanied by an R&B caliber set of backup singers, selling the point that at its heart, Geese is essentially, in essence, an indie rock soul band. So highlights of 3D Country include the phenomenal title track, on which a beautiful lead guitar line sparks Winter and his backup singers into frenzied grandiosity, Cowboy Nudes, a hippie soul rocker featuring dizzying percussion flurry mid-song, and then you have the sultry 7-minute long banger Undoer, which slithers along a thumping bass line and then builds into a heavy guitar orgied chorus. Then there's the CCR evoking Crusades, on which Winter swaggers through his most sensual and commanding vocal performance. And there's Gravity Blues, a soothing, amped-up ballad that sounds like something Billy Joel would have done back in the 1970s. And finally, there's the super melodic Tomorrow's Crusades, another lovely mid-tempo ode to classic rock. Geese's 3D Country shows this band in full control of its art. The songwriting, the vocals, the arrangements, and the celebratory mood are all top-notch. For me, the album sits in a rarefied air for the 2020s, as far as albums, along with Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, Lucy Dacus's home video, Zach Bryan's self-titled 2023 album, and yes, Geese's own Getting Killed, as among the best releases of the decade. This album, 3D Country, is stuffed with great songs, played with panache by Winter and his mates. This is the kind of tuneful capital R rock I grew up with, back when the Black Crowes, ZZ Tops, and others stimulated my young mind. And Cameron Winter, I gotta say, he's a total star, an old soul who clearly revels in the spirit of rock and roll wildness while his band cranks out one smart track after another. So folks, as I said, definitely check out 3D Country and Getting Killed and align yourself with what is probably the best young band right now in America. Arturo?
Yeah, I think it's a good record. I like it, but I think a lot of the hipster critics really overrated a bit because I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Getting Killed. My issues. I mean, I like it. It's a good album. It really is, and much of what you say, I kind of agree with. But my problems with it are musically, it's not as cohesive and as focused as Getting Killed. It's a little too sprawling and all over the place. I like Getting Killed's evenness, even though it's a very diverse record in itself. But it just flows better. 3D Country is just a little too sprawling, and I think Cameron Winter's his idiosyncratic vocalizations are a little too out of control on this record. At times it sounds great. At times just annoying. You just want him to shut the fuck up and let the band play.
Yeah.
I think on Getting Killed, he tones it down a little better. And dare I say, he sounds more soulful and he sounds more sincere on Getting Killed, because he's really singing about his own feelings on Getting Killed. 3D Country is basically a concept record about a redneck who takes acid and discovers himself.
Yeah.
So the song, that's lyrically is what the whole album is about.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah.
A macho cowboy takes acid and like all of a sudden has to reconsider his life and his role in the universe or whatnot.
Yeah, but gets in his feels. Yep.
Yeah, so in that regard, I just think Getting Killed's a better album musically. It's more cohesive, it's better lyrically, and it's better vocally. So, but that being said, 3D Country is a good record. It's a fun record for the most part. It mostly works. It's 2/3 of a great album, I think. Whereas I think Getting Killed is more consistent. There's a reason Getting Killed was their breakout album.
Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose. or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock. The Brian Jonestown Massacre. What a fascinatingly strange but wondrous band. And I encourage everybody out there to watch this 2004 documentary, and we've referred to it several times already. It's a movie called Dig. And essentially it started out, it covers, I think, a course of 7 years in the lives of the bands, the Brian Jonestown Massacre and their peers, the Dandy Warhols, and this sort of rivalry that at least existed in Anton Newcombe's mind. And so what ends up happening, it becomes a story of how the Dandy Warhols accept what they need to do in the music business and find a measure of success. You know, obviously they ended up with Bohemian Like You, which is still a staple on a lot of rock stations these days. Whereas Newcombe is portrayed, and probably accurately so, as just this really wild man, this out of control, really temperamental, really dickish guy, really standoffish guy who, you know, regularly starts fights with his band on the stage, and, you know, got arrested for kicking a fan in the head and ended up whacked out on heroin, and, you know, basically, you know, caused his band to lose faith with him, faith in him. The original band, they all walked out on him in '99, and, you know, shows how they were signed to not a major, but a well-known indie TVT, and how that all fell apart in large part because of Newcombe's problems. And so this whole thing is an exercise in separating the artist from the art. And so you can say what you want about Newcombe's mercurialness, or, you know, or his sort of you know, his kind of prickliness, and how it might get in his way personally. But there's no doubt that the man is an absolute musical genius in terms of his ability to manipulate feel and tempo and structure to make something like really hypnotic and engaging and absorbing, while doing it in a retro way that kind of touches on mostly the '60s. It's like all things '60s, and a few things early '80s, but almost all British. And it's pretty extraordinary. So definitely watch that movie, because you get a sense of that artist divide, and really kind of tells you, you know, the inherent tension of the story of this band. So with that said, Art, what's your thought on that, and what can you tell us about BJM's origin story?
Well, you already touched on it a bit, but before I go into the Brian Jonestown Massacre's origin story, I do have to address the elephant in the room, and that is always present when discussing BJM, and that is, of course, the controversial reputation of their main man, Anton Newcombe. Unfortunately, since the band's inception, their music has been frequently overshadowed by his, let's be honest, maniacal behavior. The group's history is rife with stories of interband strife and turmoil, namely Newcombe's penchant, at least in BJM's first decade, for both verbally and physically abusing band members. And then there's the rampant drug and alcohol abuse, again mostly in the band's early years. And then there's Newcombe's repeated run-ins with the law and authorities. For a man whose father was diagnosed with schizophrenia and committed suicide, it's hard to imagine that Newcombe didn't inherit at least some degree of mental illness. But I truly believe in the notion, as you mentioned earlier, Chris, that you have to separate the artist as a person from the artist's work, especially in music. If you insist on relegating an artist's work because of their behavior, I'm sorry to tell you, you'll have very little music left. I want this episode to be an analysis and a celebration of the man's work, which is what he should and I believe will be remembered for
Oh
after he
yeah,
leaves after he leaves this world.
that's going to be his
Now,
legacy. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
more than anything. Now, about that origin story. Let's make it brief, shall we? While Newcombe was born and raised in Newport Beach in Orange County, California, he moved to San Francisco in the late 1980s. It's there where he formed the Brian Jonestown Massacre in 1990. Yes, the name is indeed a hybrid of the legendary guitarist, and artist, and founder of the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones, and the psychotic Christian cult leader from the 1970s, Jim Jones. From the very beginning, Newcombe was already displaying an impish sense of humor that was postmodern in its reverence for his heroes while also taking the piss out of them. This would become more apparent in the future and in future album titles and song titles. While the BJM have been a revolving door lineup throughout the years centered around Newcombe, the core of the band in their first decade was made up of Newcombe, bassist Matt Hollywood, guitarist Jeffrey Davies, and of course, possibly the funniest and most charismatic member of the band, the non-singing tambourine player and co-frontman Joel Guyon. Over the years until his departure at the end of the 1990s, Guyon essentially served as the group's PR guy and media mouthpiece. For a few years, they made their name in the San Francisco club scene as a West Coast American answer to the British shoegazer rock scene, assimilating the influences of My Bloody Valentine and Spacemen 3, as well as the Boston band Galaxy 500, to craft a darker, heavier, trippier version of what those previous groups did. In 1993, they recorded an EP's worth of demos that wouldn't be released until 2 years later as their quote-unquote second album, titled Space Girl and Other Favorites. Even though this is officially entered as BJM's second album, it really isn't. And this podcast is not treating it as such. Several of the songs on Space Girl would show up in better form on their official first album, 1995's Methadrone. But before we delve into BJ Run's amazing run of albums in the 1990s, what are your thoughts, Chris, about the beginnings of the Brian Jonestown Massacre?
Yeah, it's interesting, like San Francisco during that time was still pretty vibrant, and so you had a pretty bustling scene there, and it's just kind of interesting that Newcombe liked what he liked with a passion, but I find it fascinating that the initial thing that they latched onto was shoegaze.
Yeah.
Which, by the time BJM was getting started, was kind of in its dying days.
Right.
This was obviously, My Bloody Valentine's Loveless, which was released in 1991, continued to resonate during that period. And clearly Kevin Shields and MPV were huge influences on Anton there, at least initially. But it's just kind of interesting that the music spread its tentacles so that here we are in like 93, 94 in San Francisco, which is a gazillion miles away from the UK. And you get this happening. And then, Joel Guyon, it just wonder how they hooked up, because, Guyon, was always, he is most famous as their tambourine player, but he also did maracas and other percussion instruments. And so it's like, how does this guy find his way into a band like this? Was he just like a drinking buddy that they just ran into one night and just kind of adopted? He's kind of like he's a real true shaggy dog.
From what I read, he was just like one of their early club shows. He just showed up and played along with the tambourine and the maracas, and Newcombe thought he looked cool doing it and invited him on stage, and he stayed.
Well, hey, that's a good way to get a gig, if you want to have that enthusiasm. Well, that tells you everything you need know about Joel Guyon. He's a dude that went to shows equipped with a tambourine. That's how enthusiastic he was. Yeah. He made club going into a participation sport.
Right.
And for what it's worth, He just released a memoir earlier this year called Jingle
Yeah,
Jangle Jungle.
it came out late 2024 in hardcover form. It picked up steam this year, and New York Times gave it a rave review and called it like one of the best rock memoirs of all time, and compared it to Jack Kerouac of all fucking things.
Okay, yeah, that's bizarre. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I may have to read this.
It's
this book
called
too.
In the Jingle Jangle Jungle, and it's basically him writing about his time with BJM in the 1990s, which must have been fucking wild.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. And because those guys all crashed in a pad that had no furniture. They really did live like nomads. So yeah. So there you go. Those are kind of my thoughts, at least on the origin story. And then you think about from where they started to where they segued to by 96 is pretty extraordinary that they found their way into their true calling from there.
So
there you go.
Anyway, let's get into the albums. We'll start the first segment, BJM in the 1990s. First album, Methadrone from 1995. Their first album finds them still ensconced in their noisy, fuzzy shoegazer rock mode. But like I said earlier, their take on shoegazer was darker, heavier, even more psychedelic than what came before them.
Yeah.
She's Gone sounds like Loveless era My Bloody Valentine put through a mind-melting death march procession. The most well-known song on the album, That Girl's Suicide, is an adrenaline rush hybrid of garage rock and pop rock psych with a killer riff and a cathartic instrumental chorus. It sounds like peak period Oasis put through a shoegaze filter. Wisdom is a druggy, trancey slice of psych rock that's equally heavy and melodic. As a subgenre, shoegazer rock was passé by the mid-1990s, but BJM's version of it is memorable for being heavier, louder, ballsier, hookier, and even more melodic than the majority of what constituted shoegazer in the late 1980s, early 1990s. That's a fact. Chris?
Yeah, but not enough. So
Yeah.
the thing with this album is it's high on noise, but short on songs.
Yeah.
You mentioned, obviously like Wisdom, She's Gone, and
Right.
and Suicide are just like awesome. Especially Wisdom. I mean, Wisdom is kind of like Anton Newcombe, just sort of that's his like eureka moment for the tempo and the feel. That is essentially what that's all about is it's the BJM feel. It's like this really absorbing, hypnotic, like wavelength that just sucks you in to the eye of Newcomb's hurricane. I mean, that's what it really is. There's something that it's almost like there's an eye to the song that everything is built around. And it's just this really engaging, absorbing thing, and so structured. I mean, it's not accidental. And so, it's kind of a crazy comparison, but it's almost like how James Brown came up with the one.
Yeah.
Well, whatever you want to call it, Newcombe came up with something that nobody's ever replicated.
Yeah.
And he kind of debuts it with Wisdom.
Right.
And so he kind of, that thing, that rhythm, that feel shows up all across the catalog, and so that's really fascinating to me. But like you said, short on songs, like you really want to feel pain. Listen to End of the Day and Outback back to back. Those songs are just awful. And
yeah, I mean it's not perfect, but the best. But I still give it a 4 out of 5 star record because the best of it is so fucking great.
I would go 3 stars.
Really?
Again, the great stuff is amazing. The other stuff not so much.
Yeah. All right, next. Take It From the Man from 1996. As I said earlier, while Space Girl and Other Favorites is their official second album, we don't consider it as such because it was actually an EP of demos recorded 2 years before their first album. This brings us to this one, BJM's first of 3 albums in 1996, and the one where they fully abandoned shoegazer and embraced the retro-futurist vision of 1960s rock that they became known for. Gritty, dirty, aggressive, mid-60s garage rock is the general modus operandi of this record, but it's also rich in other sounds and styles. David Bowie, I Love You Since I Was 6, is lush, early 1970s glam rock that actually sounds more like a T-Rex ballad. Straight Up and Down, with its stately groove and gorgeous guitar interplay, is the album's best-known song due to it being used as a theme to the popular HBO crime drama series of the 2010s, Boardwalk Empire. Bassist Matt Hollywood contributes Oh Lord, a raunchy, visceral garage rock stomper that outraves anything the Yardbirds ever did. Even sweet-sounding, echo-laden folk gems like Fucker are infused with a nervy, angry energy. Overall, it's track after track of sweaty, filthy, meaty rock and roll that served as a precursor to the garage rock revival of the late 1990s, early 2000s. Somehow, I have a hard time believing that a young Jack White wasn't listening. Chris?
Yeah, and Newcomb's actually said in interviews that without him you don't get the Stripes. So he kind of bragging about his own greatness. You know, a rock album is truly fantastic and a real treat when the prettiest song on it is called "Fucker." You know, so that has to be said. Also, the Union Jack on the album cover pretty much gives up the MO, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, basically, this is Newcombe swimming in the vibes of 65 to 67 Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very aftermathy, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, very, hey, you get off my cloud, and you know, that kind of stuff. So the Brian Jonestown Massacre nickname is probably not an accident as far as his influences.
Right.
You know, it wasn't just him being a wise guy. So here, you know, one thing about these albums and about BJM's catalog is, like, every album has a song that when you hear it, like 2/3 of the way through, they make you think this is like the greatest fucking song ever, you know, and then you listen to the next song, it's like, that's the greatest fucking song ever. So on here, there's a couple of those for me. Vacuum Boots, the album opener, which, you know, is just really rollicking and just has a great energy to it. And, you know, also like fantastic lead guitar line on that, just really, totally, really crisp, you know, and it jumpy rhythm to that. And then I also love Cabin Fever. That's a great song and has that sort of hypnotic quality to it as well. Like you said Straight Up and Down. Who is really fun. Yeah. BSA is really fun. So yeah, this album is great. This may actually approach 5 stars for me. Yeah. It's, you know, every song on it's got something. It's got juice and has melody and has structure and is awesome.
Yeah. Next, their Satanic Majesty's Second Request from 1996 as well. Many people have taken LSD. But if anyone wanted to know what LSD actually sounds like, if it has a sound, it is this record. Expansive, epic in scope, dreamy, trippy, haunting, droning, hypnotic, mind and mood altering, disturbing. This is the album that moved Genesis P. Orridge to, if I can paraphrase her, to say that the Brian Jonestown Massacre did the 1960s better than the 60s did. And I agree. The record takes its namesake from the Rolling Stones' 1967 opus, Their Satanic Majesty's Request. And not only is it better than that earlier work, I'd argue it outdoes most, not all, but most 1960s psychedelic albums in terms of boldness of vision, musicianship, songwriting, arrangements, and let's be honest, Anton Newcombe's lunacy. In a good way, of course. Matt Hollywood's bluesy shuffle, Come Down, fantasizes about having sex with the Virgin Mary while Jesus is in his mind. Speaking of Jesus, the song Jesus is a fever dream of mellotron-driven trancy ecstasy. In India, You is a whirlwind of Indian sitars and tablas, along with flutes and oddly tuned guitars, ramped up to a spiritual reverie as played by a bunch of drugged-out hooligans hopped up on cocaine. Donovan said sounds just like a 1960s acid folk track by Donovan, but the song title belies a tribute as well as an affectionate taking of the piss. It's a stunning album of retro-futurist vision, a sound of the past made modern for fresh ears, and it may very well be the Brian Jonestown Massacre's single greatest album. Chris?
Yeah, I agree with that. This probably is their greatest album, and it really is stunning in the places that it goes. I mean, yeah, in a few places Newcombe probably should have hooked George Harrison up with a few bucks in royalties. You know, so there's the Indian. There's like three or four clearly Indian music influence. Yeah, and obviously, you know, Harrison was the one that introduced that to Western popular music. But there's just some extraordinary stuff on here. Like Jesus and Anemone are just both incredible in terms of the energy, in terms of the lead lines, in terms of that almost sort of it's like the sound of quiet desperation. Because, you know, Jesus is a song. The lyrics are about quiet desperation, but it almost has this you know, by putting it in that sort of that BJM tempo package, it really does give this tension to it that really sells the song. It's absolutely just spellbinding. And then Anemone, which legend has it was Anthony Bourdain's favorite song ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Like he used to listen to that in the kitchen. Or that was like a centering song for him, but that's probably this band's most famous song. You know, in terms, you know, the vibe to it, the rhythm to it, the lead guitar. It's just a total head bouncer. It's a total nodder. It's just incredible, and you know, it's. Like you said, I call it a spiritual tribute to 60s British psychedelia because it's Newcombe doing his thing, but through the lens of those sounds.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what makes it extraordinary.
All right. Next, thank God for mental illness. The final album of 1996's Triptych finds Anton Newcombe in full-on Americana mood. Acoustic country music, folk, and blues dominate this record, and its greatest accomplishment is in showcasing how great a songwriter Newcombe is without the garage rock and psychedelic bells and whistles. Ballad of Jim Jones is a waltz-time beauty sung from the perspective of the notorious cult leader of the song title. Free and Easy Take Two is lovely in its country simplicity and lyrics of wistful deliverance from the burden of a relationship. Spanish Bee, even though it doesn't have his classical Spanish guitar on it, does a great job of reproducing the elegant and dramatic beauty of Spanish flamenco and folk music. Of course, this being the work of Newcombe, the last track on this otherwise rootsy album is a perverse 33-minute suite of songs that ranges from acoustic balladry to full band electric workouts to abstract sound collages. It's at once the most charming and the most beguiling record in the group's catalog. Chris?
Yeah, I'm a little mixed on this record. I think that they probably should have just made it 2 EPs. You know, tacking on sound of confusion is they might have done it as a joke to sort of sell the thank God for mental illness concept, because it makes no sense. Because you know the first 11 songs you have this really lovely set of acoustic folk, blues, country, and Newcombe is shockingly great at that kind of thing, of doing the kind of Bob Dylan-ish and acoustic Stones, like Beggar's Banquet era Stones kind of thing. And most of the songs are acoustic guitar, tambourine, and hand claps, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so he's able to mine that territory and to get so deep and to get so beautiful in a few spots. And and I love the Ballad of Jim Jones too. That actually kind of reminds me of the Pogues in spirit. It has that kind of almost like that drinking song quality to it, but it's still pretty cool. But Sound of Confusion, it's basically it's 6.5 minutes of urban ambient noise, followed by a succession of what must be uh, cutting room floor songs from previous sessions and previous albums.
A couple of those tracks would end up being on future albums in better form, of course, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and listen to it more closely. But it's this pastiche of not all that engaging songs mixed in with all the ambient noise, and it's just kind of like, what are they trying to do here? And to me, if it was supposed to be like an art piece, they should have released it on its own. They should have had this should have been Thank God for Mental Illness, which you could, because it was 11 songs. It was 11 songs, 34 minutes. They could have done that as a standalone record and then done Sound of Confusion as an EP. That would have been better. Here, it just because of that, they clash and it kind of becomes a clusterfuck. So, but otherwise, like you said, the songs themselves urban legend is that this album was recorded in one day.
Yep.
For a grand total expenditure of $17.36.
Yep.
I mean, this is what Newcombe has said in interviews, and who knows, maybe there's some put on there, but clearly it all comes from the same session. It all comes from the same thrust or sort of same well of inspiration from that, and get rid of Sound of Confusion. I think it would probably be right there with Satanic Majesty's Request as their best album.
FYI, this album is one of their highest rated albums according to Metacritic.
Yeah, I know. I know. There's a lot of fanboys.
There's considered one of their absolute very best. I actually like the 33-minute suite because I think it alternates between creepy, weird, and beautiful and rocking at the same time. It goes between, it runs the whole gamut of everything that's great about Jonestown in just 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm a Newcombe fanboy, so I'm going to support it.
Yeah. So no, it's basically it's like an art collage piece.
Right. Sure.
But yeah, no, I understand why people are enthusiastic about this record. But to me, it has to do with the 11 songs before Sound of Confusion, I think. Anyway.
All right. Next, Give It Back from 1997. This album manages to take all the elements and styles of the previous three albums and amalgamate them into one beautifully cohesive whole. Supersonic, with a dash in the middle so it won't be confused with the Oasis classic, opens the record with a surreal, elliptical, narcotic rush that leaves the impression that a new kind of psychedelia has just been invented. The back-to-back hits of Malila and Salam start with an irresistible hydrate of blues rhythm and Indian sitar arrangement and end with full immersion into Indian classical music. Sue takes the slow-burning intensity of the post-John Cale Velvet Underground, particularly their live sound of 1969, and blows it up to epic cinematic proportions. Servo is blissful, strident, mid-tempo folk rock. Earlier in the year, the Dandy Warhols put out a single, Not If You Were the Last Junkie on Earth, that, legend has it, was a dig at Anton Newcombe, who had become a junkie at this time. Well, bassist Matt Hollywood strikes back with his own number, Not If You Were the Last Dandy on Earth, an even better song of glam-inflected grunge pop. This near-perfect album is a favorite of many hardcore BJM fans, and I have it near the top in my own personal ranking. Chris?
Yeah, I don't. The great stuff is great, but it's a little bit of an unfocused record. It's kind of, like you said, it's kind of like a pastiche of the styles and flavors that they were working with on the previous records. And so, like throwing in that Indian-inspired song that you mentioned, is just like too much of a curveball to me. But there is some great stuff on here. And the other thing about the album is it sounds more akin to the modern rock of the day. It doesn't have kind of the weird recording styles that are going on in the others. It's not recorded to sound like it was made in 1967. It actually sounds like it was recorded in 1997, and that's sold by one of the better songs on the record. "This Is Why You Love Me," which would not have been out of place in modern rock rotation in 97, 98.
Right.
And it's clean and it's modern, it's crisp. It almost sounds like it's digitally recorded. Servo's probably the best song here. Has that patented BJM feel. Makes you think it's the best song ever written, kind of deal. Just built on these acoustic guitars, but has this really odd little flute as a touch to it, kind of in the crevices. So there's that.
Okay.
I got to say, to me, the strangest and coolest song on the album is probably number one hit "Jam," which is this bluesy number. It's kind of like a shuffling blues, and it would have befitted the Stones probably in the Beggar's Banquet era, and so they're playing around there. So I like that song. So I wish they'd done more of that and a little less screwing around. Again, the other thing about the BJM's albums, at least in the first part, was they were way long. They tended to be between 65 and 75 minutes long. Yeah. And so this is that was a problem in the first record, Methadone, and it's kind of a problem here. They could have cut back on a few songs and made it more efficient. So tighten it up.
I don't think you can. I don't think you should take out Malila and Salam because they add to the texture. Like I said, this album is supposed to be an amalgam of the three 1996 albums. And you have a little bit of each of those three in this, and you need to have Malila and Salam because they reflect their Satanic Majesty's Second Request side of things. So that's why I defend their inclusion. Anyway,
yeah. You're seeing it as an amalgam. I'm seeing it as a lack of focus.
Yeah. All right. Next. Strung Out in Heaven from 1998. Anton Newcombe's heroin addiction had gotten pretty bad by this point, so for this album, their first and only on large indie label TVT, Matt Hollywood had to carry more of the load in regard to both songwriting and vocal duties. The result is the cleanest sounding BJM record yet, but also, yet for its time, but also one of their most immaculately crafted, well-written ones. Got My Eye on You is clearly derived from high-octane garage rock circa 1965 to 66, but it's so devastating in its feedback-driven guitar crunch and pummeling chorus that it could only have been created in the 1990s. Pure pop rock is an area BJM had never ventured into before, but with its beautiful chord progression, gorgeous melodies all throughout, sweetly romantic lyrics, and wonderfully layered production, Hollywood's Spun is the best song Noel Gallagher never wrote for Oasis. Jennifer is absolutely sublime in its Birdsian folk rock majesty. The jangle pop gems of Wasting Away and Going to Hell, the shimmering psych pop beauty of Love, the anthemic grace of Lantern, it's track after track of one of the best garage rock and neo psychedelia albums ever made, and a testament to how turmoil and strife can sometimes contribute to some of a band's best work. For me, this is one of several 5-star classics in their discography. Chris?
Yeah, this album, it's the band's summer record. I mean, it's surprisingly breezy. And even the more rough-honed stuff still has kind of a beauty to it, and kind of a pretty and almost hopeful bent to it. You didn't mention "Let's Pretend It's Summer," which is a great song. Yeah. And that's just a pure pop nugget. I mean, that almost sounds like something the Turtles would have done.
Yeah.
That's kind of, almost like a novelty kind of, almost music hall-y kind of thing. It's a psychedelic peppiness, and it also brings to mind Donovan.
Right.
And then of the Matt Hollywood stuff, my favorite of those songs is "Got My Eye on You," which is just awesome. And like you said, it has wouldn't be out of place on the Nuggets box set. Has that kind of feel to it, but it's just really got a bounce to it. And then Joel Guyon helps out on vocals in that, and kind of gives it some real character, and gives it, he adds a little bit of shtick to the proceedings, which is pretty good. But and then you also name drop something very important here. In all of their stuff, a lot of their 60s reverence centered around the Stones for in those 96 records. Here, there's a lot of Byrds. You said it's Byrdsian, and so so there is some 12-string stuff going on, and there's almost like that sunny. I don't know if it's ironically sunny, but there's a sunniness to it that that it has that kind of jaunty Byrds type of pre-country Byrds,
right?
The sort of David Crosby era Byrds. That really lends it, something. So I really like this record too. I think it's on it's just behind Second Majesty's Request and Take It From the Man for me.
All right. Next, bringing it all back home again, the EP from 1999. By the end of the decade, interband turmoil and infighting, worsening drug addiction, and multiple run-ins with the police meant that the Brian Jonestown Massacre were close to the point of being just Anton Newcombe and his neuroses. However, Matt Hollywood and that cheery tambourine player, Joel Guyon, stuck around for one more record, this all-acoustic EP whose title was a play on Bob Dylan's 1965 album of the same name. No matter how down Newcombe could be, one has to give credit to the man for his resiliency and resourcefulness in crafting yet another masterful collection of country and folk songs to rival Thank God for Mental Illness. Mansion in the Sky is as convincing a gospel country number can get from a group of hedonistic non-believers. The gospel, according to A.A. Newcombe, is shameless self-mythologizing, but if you look into Newcombe's actual life at the time and career and put the song in context, it actually comes across as a song of triumph under adverse odds. The most notorious song is Arkansas Revisited, a reworked cover of a Charles Manson song extended to a ridiculous 13 minutes. And yes, it's actually really good. For my money, it's one of the best EPs of the 1990s. Chris?
Yeah, great EP, and again sells the notion that Newcombe could have gotten an entire career out of doing this. Yeah, doing the acoustic, backwoods folk country guy shtick. He could have gotten an entire career because this stuff is just great, and it's actually the God spell. It's a play on words. It's him being a wise guy. The God spell, according to A.A. Newcombe. But in a way, it's a shticky name for a pretty poignant song, where he actually is kind of putting himself out there, and then but making the biblical joke, which is weird because he's making kind of a derisive joke about the gospel, but several places in their catalog, he actually has what may just be sincere spiritual longings. Of seeking, the universal answers, whether it's through Jesus, or some other entity. That there seems to be an undercurrent of spiritual hunger in a lot of his work. But anyway, I love Arkansas Revisited. I didn't know it was a Manson cover. Yeah. So that even makes it funnier.
Was some of the lyrics reworked? Okay. The lyrics. He changes some of the words and he extends it to 13 minutes. It's got 13-minute jam.
Well, I love it because it's just this is this is the BJM feel in this record, and they keep it going for 13 minutes, but you really it's just absorbing and hypnotic and just sort of just really so well structured.
On this episode, we delved into and marveled at the first 2 decades of the Brian Jonestown Massacre. For the next episode, we're going into the opposite direction and continue our shit series by taking a particularly pungent dump on one of this podcast's most disliked bands, Creed. In the middle of the 1990s, Creed emerged from Florida, of course it had to be Florida, as part of the freshly anointed post-grunge musical climate, with an especially onerous brand of Christian rock that was as unoriginal and derivative of the earlier grunge pioneers as it was obnoxious with its lyrical self-importance and faux philosophizing. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report tackles this most hideous of bands and explains why Creed are shit. Now we have the Brian Jonestown Massacre in the 2000s, more specifically the noughties, or the aughts, as Americans like to say. And the first album of the first BJ album of this decade, Bravery, Repetition, and Noise from 2001, with Jim Jarmusch, the famous director, on the cover of the album. Yep. By this time, Anton Newcombe seemed to get his life, his health, and his band back together, albeit with a new flexible lineup. If not the exercise in flawless songwriting that the previous album was, Bravery, Repetition, and Noise exchanges pristine songs and production for a return to the gritty subterranean psychedelia of BJM's early work, as if Newcombe wanted to craft a back-to-form record to see if he could still do it. And like everything Newcombe touched during this incredible period of his career, it was brilliant. Open Heart Surgery is a searingly emotional, tortured ballad that sounds like The Cure put through a lo-fi garage rock filter. Nevertheless, is a richly textured masterpiece of upbeat folk rock that sounds like the best song Arthur Lee never wrote for love. Sailor is a soaring, glorious version of a 1967 track by garage psych band The Crying Shames, and Let Me Stand Next to Your Flower, yes, hilariously punning on the classic Jimi Hendrix song, is exactly what it would sound like if late 1960s psychedelia had a head-on collision with 1970s glam rock. Overall, it's another BJM cracker of a record, only to be exceeded by the next one. Chris?
Yeah, the thing about this album is it's probably among the electric records, probably the most subdued of his electric records in terms of the songs, in terms of the feel. I mean, it's there's no wild man tendencies to it. It's actually kind of subdued, in some ways solemn. And he does put it through the psychedelic filter. It does harken back to Incense and Peppermints. In some respects, but the classic song on this one for me is Nevertheless.
Sure.
I love that song. It's just just really great little riff and just great pop structure and just really engaging. Newcombe. It's almost like a confessional from Newcombe. It's singer-songwriter stuff, but given the psychedelic filter, and it really, really, really works. So yeah, not as good as some of the other records, but the standouts really, really, truly stand out.
Yeah. Next one is, I think, maybe their most underrated album ever, and this is Our Music from 2003. Hints of electronica in the form of programmed beats and synthesizer flourishes start to pop up in the BJM sound on this album, as we said before, and This Is Our Music from 2003, especially on the beautiful John Lennon-esque ballad Star Cleaner and the spooky instrumental The Pregnancy Test. Anton Newcombe also delves into uncharted territory for him in the lush, gorgeous, thickly arranged Brian Wilson-esque chamber pop of, I can't pronounce the name correctly, Tchusse, or Tchusse, spelled Tschussse. I hope I got it right. I probably didn't.
Probably shoosh.
Yeah, probably. He goes full steam, and impressively so, into Ennio Morricone-esque desert landscape instrumentals in You Look Great When I'm Fucked Up. For as expansive and thrillingly diverse as this record is, BJM still manages to crank out one of the single greatest garage rock, folk rock hybrid songs they ever did with When Jokers Attack. Prozac versus Heroin takes the jangly folk rock that Newcombe had perfected and morphs it into a Phil Spector-esque wall of sound epic with a beautiful string arrangement in the middle. A New Low and Getting High is more woozy, off-kilter, druggy psych rock. I can go on and on. This is the most unheralded, most underrated masterpiece in the BJM catalog. Chris?
Yeah, this is a very, very strong record, and it does harken back to Take It From the Man, I think, in terms of its reverence and in terms of that. In terms of that sort of light psychedelia,
but it's a more beautiful record. There's more beauty on this one.
Yeah, it's down and dirty, but it also has, like you said, it has its beautiful spots. Like Heroin versus Prozac has got some electric stuff going on, with the keys synths that makes it really, really engaging. I love New Low and Getting High. I think that's this album song that makes you say that's the best song ever, man. Just has that structure and that edge. And you're right that this is kind of the beginning of him futzing around with synthesizers and drum machines, which becomes much, much more prevalent in later period BJM, which we're not really covering on this episode. But here's where it kind of starts to pop up.
Right. All right. Next, We Are the Radio, an EP from 2005. When this album came out, Anton Newcombe's profile and that of the Brian Jonestown Massacre as a whole had risen considerably after the success of the award-winning documentary Dig, which followed the parallel careers of and rivalry between BJM and the Dandy Warhols. The EP that came out in the wake of this newfound fame and attention is an under-the-radar gem in that it straddles the line between acoustic folk and electronica to create a new kind of psychedelia. Again, co-sung and co-written with Sarah Beth Tuchek, Seer is an astonishingly gorgeous slice of psychedelic electro-folk that's as haunting as it is earwormy. Teleflow 5 versus Amplification sounds like it comes straight out of Radiohead's Kid A Amnesiac period, while God Is My Girlfriend sounds like trancey psych folk done as the soundtrack to a Conan the Barbarian movie. EPs tend to get short shrift when listeners dive into a band's music. This is not a mistake to be made with the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Chris?
Yeah, under the radar for sure. So under the radar, it's not even available on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube. It's all, there all that, but it is, it's a pretty impressive little slice of music for Newcombe and Tuchek. She co-wrote a couple of the songs and she sings lead on all of them. Yeah. And so basically it's just Anton and her, and then maybe like one other musician. So this is kind of a, it's released under the BJM name, but it's really this, Tuchek's his ex-girlfriend by this point. And so it's just, let's do a little album with my ex-girlfriend. Who knows? They were probably fucking still too, but yeah, just quite pretty, and has those subtle little touches. But it's another one of these acoustic, ballady type albums that again with his other EP, bringing it back home again, and with Thank God for Mental Illness. He could have made a whole career out of this, but he was just too itchy. He had too much to get out in too many different ways for that to just be his narrow lane.
Yeah. Next, My Bloody Underground from 2008. This album must have been a shock at first listen to longtime fans of BJM. This is, to this day, the most relentlessly experimental, uncompromising album Anton Newcombe has ever produced. Allegedly, Newcombe took large amounts of psychedelic drugs throughout the recording of this record, and it indeed sounds like the product of living inside your mind's eye and slowly walking down the hall faster than a cannonball. It's heavy, it's dense, it's oppressive, it's disorienting, and it's shockingly brilliant. In a lesser artist's hands, this album would be a sloppy mess. In the gloriously twisted mind of Newcombe, it makes total sense and somehow sounds disciplined and cohesive. The album title's nod to both The Velvet Underground and My Bloody Valentine is more than just a cheeky tribute. It hints at what's inside. Spacey shoegazer rock comes back in full effect for the first time since BJM's early days, but this isn't your mom and dad's shoegazer. Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney on Heather Mills's Wooden Peg is shoegazer done as pure ominous evil, with lyrics that tackle the inherent wickedness in right-wing Christianity. So grab your silver bullets and sharpen your stakes and lock your fucking doors, for Jesus saves. Yikes. While We Are the N-Words of the World is, contrary to its aggressive title, a beautiful, classically inspired piano instrumental. Dark Wave, segueing into Big Drill Car, brings back the electronic beats of the previous two records, but drenched in oppressive, thick, soupy, echoey guitars. Basically, this album is all the heavy elements of the BJM sound: shoegazer, 60s psychedelia, garage rock intensity, electronica, and making them heavier and more intense via large injections of LSD. It may be a little too much for some, but for me, it's another 5-star classic. Chris?
Yeah, this album is about as maximal as it gets.
Yeah.
But it shows, fascinatingly the duality in Newcombe's personality, in that he could be so straightforward and so poignant and so pointed in his lyrics and the way that he structures his songs, and he could be so intense. And like you said, the intensity here is off the charts. I mean, Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney is like, wow. I mean, that's like a mix of shoegaze and 60s psychedelia.
If there's a Hall of Fame for anti-Christianity songs, this is in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But also, I mean, but for a seriously done and written and intensely crafted record, it's got the most ridiculous song titles of any album I've almost ever seen. Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney, obviously, but Who Fucking Pissed in My Well? We Are the Ends of the World. Just Like Kicking Jesus. And then my personal favorite, Automatic Faggot for the People.
I'm surprised REM's people didn't contact Anton for this. I was like, hey, guy, come on, man.
That is like such a nasty shot at Michael Stipe, and then, Monkey Powder, which is actually a really great song. And then Black Hole Symphony, which is a shot at Soundgarden. And so just really, really funny stuff. So, great record. It's an adventure to listen to. I got to listen to a little bit more. Again, this period of BJM I wasn't as familiar with coming into this, so I need to spend more time with it. But it's a lot to eat in one meal. And it's 14 songs in 1 hour 24 minutes. So I'm assuming back in the day it was probably 2 discs.
Yeah, I got. If you want to appreciate My Bloody Underground, I got 2 words for you: headphones, weed.
Yeah, pretty much. yeah, and that's it. And I remember them. I actually remember them playing "Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney" at the show that we went to. Yeah, that's pretty indelible, and it brought me back actually to that show. I think they might have opened that set with that song.
Yeah. I remember listening to this album for the very first time high on hash oil. Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's when I first heard. I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest album ever. Oh.
You didn't have to call the suicide hotline for that? that might have driven me over to Bloody Edge. Yeah. Hash oil.
Next.
Wow.
Next.
Okay.
Who Killed Sergeant Pepper from 2010? While My Bloody Underground was experimental and intense and stretched the BJM sound and ethos to its breaking point, this album pivoted into another direction entirely, diving headfirst into electronic dance music and the challenging post-punk of Anton Newcombe's youth in a way no other BJ album had done before. In doing so, the record ended up being one of the most strangely appealing and catchiest ones Newcombe has ever crafted. This is the one thing we did not want to have happen, is the sound of Joy Division produced by the Prodigy's Liam Howlett rather than Martin Hannett. Let's Go Fucking Mental is a trip-hop techno hybrid that is both goofy spoof as well as killer dance track with an awesome bass line. Yet another example of BJM being reverent and piss-taking at the same time. Tunger Hniffer is stomping electro glam rock, while This Is the First of Your Last Warning is a 21st century version of acid house music, slowed down by even more psychedelic drugs, augmented by haunting yet sexy vocals, and suggesting the direction 1990s U2 could have taken after their Zooropa period. It's an album that never fails to surprise, delight, and fascinate, and it may very well be the last truly great and innovative record BJM did. It's also the first time Matt Hollywood had recorded with BJM in over a decade. Chris?
Hey, who says reconciliation isn't possible? You actually kind of stole a line I have in my notes, which is that this is Joy Division and Aphex Twin doing an album together. Yeah. It just has that weird vibe to it where it clearly goes back to like Joy Division's Closer and some of the singles that they were doing back then, but doing it in this sort of like weirdly European way. And I think by this point, he was living in Berlin by this point, wasn't he?
I think he still lives in Berlin.
Yeah, he still lives in Berlin, but I think it was around this time that he expatriated. Right. And so, so clearly he's having fun on the ground. I think he partially recorded this album in Iceland, as well. And so I think that's pretty clear, with some of this, like felt tip pictures of UFOs is just crazy way to end the record. It's just nuts. And, again, I love Let's Go Fucking Mental because it's so dumb, but so brilliant. It's just like he just allows himself to go into a dumb space to create a great pop song. And so I could see myself driving in the car singing that and making that kind of my new theme music for a while. Let's go fucking mental. Just really, really great stuff. So and then it's also worth mentioning too that in addition to the clever song titles and album titles and the sort of that kind of like wicked sense of humor of his, sometimes his album covers could do the trick. So this is an album called Who Killed Sergeant Pepper, and the cover image is Jesus Christ on the cross. So that
he does have that morose humor, but also he has a mordant wit, is what I would call.
That's mordant wit. That's a shot at the rock critic intelligentsia. And how much they deify Sergeant Pepper. So he's kind of making a comment on the tastemakers by doing that, and which is consistent. If you watch if you watch Dig, he says a lot of things about the music business and about the stuff and about all the bullshit that he doesn't want anything to do with. And of course, and naturally he's kind of young and full of shit and playing the I'm an artiste, but he does kind of have a point about that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you all may wonder, especially if you're a hardcore BJM fan, why we've decided to stop our tour of BJM's discography in 2010. That's because while Anton Newcombe continued to make music throughout the 10s and into the early 20s, the albums have been just okay. There's nothing wrong, per se, with any of the late period BJM records. It's just that for the past decade and a half, he's, for the most part, veered between recycling his old patented 1990s sounds and doing interesting ambient soundscape music. Now, being interesting is all fine and good, but to me, one of the greatest aspects about the music of the Brian Jonestown Massacre is that no matter how out there the music got, Newcombe always grounded his best music in great songwriting. Maybe he spoiled us so much with such an amazing body of work from 1995 through 2010 that we're holding him to a high standard. But hey, that's a compliment as far as I'm concerned. Chris, You're the big picture guy. Give us your take on the legacy of Mr. Newcombe and the Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Gotcha. First, a comment on just sort of where they are now. So they still tour all the time.
Sure,
And,
that's where he makes his money, basically.
Yeah, and so you go to the shows, you're gonna be able to revel in all that greatness. And so essentially, they're a legacy act that still puts out new music just because that's Newcombe. Newcombe wakes up with like 40 songs in his head. And so he needs that creative outlet, even if he does do a little bit of recycling, and even he still maintains the structure. The songs just aren't there like they used to be. But that BLM structure, that's their greatest legacy, and that's where I'm going to start the legacy on this. That they proved as much as any band post 1990 to the present that you could be stylistically and aesthetically diverse while also being consistent. And so they had that consistent BJM thing. I keep wanting to say BLM, BJM thing that they were able to do it in a shoegazing context with wisdom. They were able to do it in like a Donovan psychedelia rapping with antimony. They kind of did it with let's go fucking mental, towards in 2010, and so they carried it with them, and so so they just kind of were an exemplar for bands that Newcombe inspired a lot of copycats that took his thing and tried to make it theirs, and obviously most of the time it fails miserably. Why? Because it's not their thing. But more positively, I think he inspired artists out there to work to find their thing. Bands
like Moon Duo, Psychic Ills are basically children of Anton Newcombe. Tame Impala were influenced by
Tame Impala for sure. But
early Tame Impala.
Early Tame Impala. But Tame Impala is a good example of a progeny that didn't rip off BJM, but were inspired.
Early King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard as well.
Yeah, and so they were able to kind of find their own thing within the same aesthetic, and so that's what it is. Is it's like carve your own voice, even while like you said, it's retro-futurism. It wouldn't be futurism if you weren't moving things forward, if you weren't moving the ball forward, and that's their other one of their other legacies is the retro-futurism. That became more of a thing that a lot of people did. That sort of Beck engaged in some retrofuturism, although he came I guess a little bit before, or he was contemporary with Brian Jonestown Massacre. But then you have like younger bands like the Coral, which did one of my favorite albums of that era, that self-titled debut from what was it 2002.
2002,
yeah, which was just fantastic, and that was a perfect example because they also were like they were cribbing nuggets, but they did it really fucking well with some really strong songs, and so that carried it through there, and then even now even in black music, a guy like Curtis Harding engages in retrofuturism, and so they taught that was a thing. You could do it well, and that there was a way to do it where you walk that fine line between reverence and derivativeness. Yeah, and they did that well, and so there's that, and then there's the other thing too, which is just they give hope that the artistic center can still reign true and reign predominant for certain artists, that it is possible to not compromise your vision and still be very successful. That BJM, Anton Newcombe's crazy behavior and eccentricities and drug problems and let's face it, cruelty streak probably cost his band a chance to he even said in an interview that I read that that his band was bitching at him for being a dick, costing a major label, because it's like, oh, come on, man, they just took us out to a $6,000 dinner. you know, and all that. But, it's still possible to be uncompromising and to be successful. He built his cult. It's like, hey, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. He built his cult one bite at a time, and it's sustained him to where he can do all kinds of things now, and he, all kinds of side projects, and he produces people too. And so he does, yeah. He's an in-demand sort of underground psychedelic, kind of retro-future psychedelic now, but he's an in-demand producer for artists like that. And so not quite the same thing as Fugazi in the sense that, that Newcombe didn't do everything.
Right.
The only thing Newcombe has ever been interested in is making music.
Yeah.
Writing music, playing music, recording music, and then going on the road and playing music. So you can't really compare him to Fugazi, but that sort of artistic single-mindedness,
right?
He proved that it's still possible to do that and kind of accidentally be successful. So I would think that those are the main the main things that define their legacy. It's that consistency through diversity. It's that retro-futurism, and it's that musical, stubborn independence,
the single-mindedness,
reigning supreme.
Right.
Yeah. There you go. What do you say?
All right, we're done. We hope you folks please go listen to the Brian Jonestown Massacre. At the very least, listen to the Spotify playlist that Chris is going to post or has posted, because I made it myself.
You actually curated this one, and I gotta hand it to you. We're not all that much different, because you curated exactly the way I do mine, which is going in chronological order, and then going in track order.
Right.
Yeah, and so
exactly.
That's the way I do mine. So that's the way everybody should do theirs.
Right. Which you could hear the evolution of the artist and the band. Right?
Although occasionally I just throw in whole albums, but obviously can't do that with these guys, because then it would be like a 14-hour long playlist, because like their shortest albums is like 47 minutes.
Right.
So anyway, so that does it for this episode, folks. And with that, as we always do at the end of these episodes, we encourage you to join our fabulous Curmudgeonly community on Facebook. We've been up there for quite a while, and recently the numbers have grown. So we've got a few new members of our community. So welcome. You can find us at facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. We post lots of good stuff up there. I think our latest post is a thing I posted of Anton Newcombe having a meal and a conversation with Anthony Bourdain, which is actually really fascinating. Two crazy guys engaged in civility. Anyway, send us some fan mail. What do you think about BJM? Are you not a fan? Are you a super fan? And if you're a super fan, how do we do? We want to do them justice. So send us fan mail at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And as Art mentioned, and as we've talked about, we have the Spotify playlist, and you'll be able to find that in the episode description wherever you get these your podcasts from, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, and wherever else out there. So check that out. And hey, yo, dig it!